Hello, It Girls, and we're back with the It Girls Guide, and I am here today with a longtime friend, Sara Leeds.
Yes, hi.
Hi, first I'll let you introduce yourself, and then typically how I start these things out with my guests, because typically you guys are friends, is we'll talk about how we met. But first, give us your resume of who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah. So my name is Sara Leeds, and I am the creator and host of Doorman Stories primarily. So that is an interview show on socials where I go around and interview all of the doormen of New York. It's very self-explanatory, but it's really my pride and joy, and I love it so much. But I'm also a creative director and a strategist and all the fun things.
You wear a lot of hats.
I wear a lot of hats. I call myself a multi-hyphenate. Very much a, like the fig tree poem is very the bell jar, but the fig tree part of that poem, the Sylvia Plath poem, is very much identifiable to me. I've just reframed it into a positive because I have a lot of things I'm passionate about.
It is a positive. First we'll talk about how we met. Yeah. Okay. So as you guys know, I'm from New Orleans, but I also spent my last 2 years of college at Tulane, which is where I met Sara.
Yes.
And were you in a sorority?
Pi Phi.
Yeah. All my friends were Pi Phi. I did not join a sorority.
Yes.
Because one, I was late in the game because I transferred after my sophomore year. And two, I feel like with sororities, like I could go to all the college parties without having been in a sorority, and I was still friends with all the girls, so it didn't feel necessary. But all my girlfriends were Pi Phi.
You were a G'd. Remember everyone would get called a G'd? That's what you were.
You're going to explain to the people what that means.
Sorry. So GED is short for GDI, which is short for goddamn independence. So when somebody, can I say goddamn? I don't know. But that was the when you didn't join a sorority or a frat, you were a GED.
I was a GED by almost default, because I was like, I'm not going to rush as a
junior.
That would be silly. So we met in college, and then we both ended up in New York. But you're from the area,
yes,
not from the city.
So I technically for the first 5 years of my life lived in the city, right near Washington Square Park. Before it was a content zoo, it actually was a park. And then formally grew up in Westchester, which is just north of Manhattan. Yeah.
And then we both ended up in New York permanently.
Yeah.
Now we're coming up on 10 years.
No, we're not.
I guess you're 9. Because you graduated the year before me.
Well, I'm 22, so how could it be 9 years?
Yeah, right.
It's really weird.
Let's not age ourselves. You're right. So we've been peripherally in the city, or I would say peripherally around each other, right? Because we're friends, but we live kind of different lives, right? In different circles. And we're always kind of crossing over. And one of the things I love about our friendship is I feel like no matter what, we've always been supporting one another. Yeah. If I'm having an event, if you're having an event, if you're promoting some sort of business, I'm there. And I love that about our friendship, because I think that, I think a lot of people assume that a friendship needs to look a certain way, and it doesn't always have to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like a huge part of our friendship is our entrepreneurial endeavors and supporting each other that way, which I've always found very comforting and sweet about our friendship.
Oh my God. No, but for real, very well said.
Right?
Yes.
And part of the reason, I had told you this off camera, but part of the reason I wanted to interview you for this is because I wanted to have someone on the show who's a content creator, but that's not a fashion blogger or a makeup blogger of sorts, because I think that's what people tend to think when they hear content creator. Yeah. But what you do is very different. And you had a corporate job. You were in the corporate life. And there was a moment where you were kind of going back and forth and straddling the two, until you got to the point where you said, well, actually, that's the question.
Yeah.
We'll go back to the beginning. But my question would be, did you decide to make the leap and say, I'm going to maybe struggle for a bit, but I want to do this full time? Or were you one of the people that kind of was doing both and then realized, okay, I'm spread too thin, I have to choose?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, and also this is why I love we're having this conversation too, because you've seen every shade of me. I've seen every shade of you, as an adult, all of the different eras we've had. Yeah. So I started my career in management consulting, and then over COVID had the kind of quarter life crisis. It happened to coincide, COVID and the quarter life crisis for me.
We're all kind of thinking about our life and where we're going during COVID, when you're like, the world might end. How do I want to leave my mark?
Right. What's my legacy? What's my Sara Leeds legacy? So, and that was when I started thinking about what is something that I can do that is really, the way that I phrased it and really framed it in my head was, at the job I had been working at the time, no matter what I did for that company, no matter how big or small, it would have always been X company did that, not Sara Leeds did that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what's something, and like really not a narcissistic way, but just like a true like legacy way. What's something that I can have on this earth existing that is synonymous with Sara Leeds versus like this company, this bigger entity. And so that's when like the crisis crept in, and I did start my content journey more in fashion, specifically sustainable fashion, which you were,
I want to talk about.
Yeah. And you were like one of the first people I spoke with about, which was like so
that
fun.
was when you were called She Rhymes with Orange.
So I started this like kind of like resale business called Rhymes with Orange, because it was like one of a kind and kind to the planet. Famously, nothing rhymes with the word orange. So that was kind of like the catchphrase. The impetus for that was because we were stuck at home during COVID. So many people were taking stock of the amount of crap that they owned. So many people were reselling their clothing, donating their clothing, dumping their clothing. And I wanted to take a really critical lens on what sustainable fashion looked like and what the resale market looked like. I've been a Poshmark girly since literally middle school. My parents sold my childhood home, but when we still had it, I had an unrenovated bathroom in that home that I literally just dumped my clothes into and would resell from there. That was like my Poshmark studio. It was like an unfinished bathroom.
Yeah.
So
I know you didn't like necessarily pioneer that space,
Totally.
right? But I feel like during that time when you started doing that, I really didn't know a lot of sustainable fashion content creators.
Right.
It wasn't really as much. I mean, there was, I guess, a few micro influencers and whatnot, but I really wasn't seeing anyone else on the internet being so public about it and making that their, main identity, I guess.
Yeah, it was very niche at the time, which like as my story progresses was not the right like singular niche for me. I have a very hard time sticking to one niche, but it was a really great like foray for me into not necessarily content creation, but more so like what starting a business could look like for me.
Yeah. And also like the networking of it, because I do remember at the time, and why I wanted you to speak on this is because we think of content creation as just taking photos.
Yeah.
And posting it on your own page. But I remember when you were doing this, you were writing for other
Publications,
brands and publications and kind of creative directing certain things and consulting.
It almost happened out of ignorance in the sense that like everything I knew and know about content creation, influencer marketing, this whole space was very much self-taught, but in a like non-traditional way, because I never thought of myself as an influencer. So I never set out to be an influencer. I much more sought out to be a creative and a creative director. Like I literally would vision board my title.
Yeah.
I made like a fake like Instagram bio for myself to like manifest what I wanted to be. And it was always like a creative director or a producer or a writer or something in the entertainment space, not a fashion blogger or...
And then your Instagram is kind of like your calling card, your resume of sorts.
Exactly. So that more came second to your point. Like I started writing for other publications. I started doing even like copywriting for some other brands. So I would do like their product descriptions or their web copy, things like that. And then I also started doing like more broader kind of like brand strategy work and marketing work because my background was in marketing. It was starting to be what I was doing in the consulting space too. So it just like, that was more how I built the network in social media. And then it was also like a big part of it too was I was unhappy with my network and I was like, how can I expand this so that it feels more creative and inspirational? It's like that saying where like, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Like I was not happy with those 5 people.
I pride myself on my network, but not because of the people that, who they are, what they can do for me, but I want to be surrounded by people who elevate me, who challenge me, who
expand your way of thinking,
think of the world differently.
Yeah.
And I know jealousy becomes a big topic when you start talking about this, but I look at like, if I have a friend who's doing something that I want to do, that's proof that it's possible.
Yes.
So I want to surround myself with people who are doing things that get me excited to do something similar or to just inspire me. If they're working hard and something came to fruition for them, the same thing can happen for me, even if it's in a different space.
100%. And that was exactly like what my train of thought was for it. And then you were one of the first people I talked to when I was doing the resale business, which was like so cool and fun. And then
I think you came over and we you sold some of my stuff.
I sold some of your things. We did like drinks, we did closet things, like all of the things. I had some of your clothes in my basement for a while. Like, we were scrappy, which is like, that's good. We have grit. Yes. You need grit. You need the journey.
If you've been in New York this long, we won't say how long because we're not aging ourselves. But if you've been in New York this long, it's like you have to hustle. You cannot live in New York and not hustle.
No.
It's just impossible.
Then it's not a real experience, truly. Okay, so then I realized, so to your original question around like, how did I know when to like dive more into content creation? So I ended up leaving consulting and moving into, at the time I'd cast a wide net. I was like, let me just get out and do something creative. I didn't know what that meant. So I was applying to publishers, like production houses.
Did you quit first and then start looking, or you were doing it simultaneously?
I have never quit a job without having another job as a backup. Not that I'm not supportive of people doing that, but
no.
Yeah.
But especially in a place like New York, I see so many of my girlfriends, and not just girlfriends, guy friends as well, they're upset with their job and they just want to get out. And especially in this economy, in this market.
Yeah.
You kind of have to have something else going for you because it's difficult out there. You need to have some sort of overhead income coming in, even if it's something small.
I 1,000% agree. I'm just very honest with myself.
Yeah.
Even if I said, okay, like I have a 3-month runway in savings or something like that, my anxiety will always trump that. And I know that if I didn't have the backup, it just wouldn't work with my anxiety. I'd be freaking out. It wouldn't be a fruitful job search for that reason. Like,
and you have to be honest with yourself about what kind of lifestyle you want to live.
Yeah.
And what you're actually comfortable with. I know when I started kind of transitioning, there was a long period where I was working 12, 18-hour days because I was doing my main job, but then also my side hustle, trying to get everything done. But could I have just gone to my side hustle and just focus on that? Probably.
Yeah.
But then I probably wouldn't have been able to afford to do other things. I still enjoy going out with my girlfriends. I still enjoy going to a concert or whatnot. I wasn't taking the vacations I used to take, but hey, I want to be able to go on a nice dinner with my girlfriends, and I need to keep both at the same time
1,000%.
for a period of time.
It's real life. Like, that's just the decision you have to make. And when I was like, okay, I can't do consulting, but I do still want to work and I want to build up the sort of like creative credentials on my resume, I just cast a wide net. I happened to fall into an influencer marketing agency. Okay. It was not what I sought out to do. It's literally just like where where it fell. But I ended up really falling in love with it. It's what taught me. It's how I've met some of my best friends today who just happen to be influencers, but it was more, again, like the creative, so
you were
zest.
On like the business side of the...
Yeah. So I got hired as a social producer. At the time they were helping. I mean, TikTok changes every day. Yeah. At the time, TikTok was still so new.
You were one of the first people that I knew that was like actively posting on and using TikTok.
Yeah.
Regularly.
I was just like teaching myself it, not even to build an audience, but more so to understand how I could build my clients, my brand's audiences. Cause as soon as I got hired, literally on day one, they were like, okay, your clients are Clarins and YSL. And I was like,
what?
Bro, like these are like major names.
But what a way to learn to just like throw you into the fucking fire and figure it out.
Yes. So like I truly believe you learn by doing, and that is exactly what it was. We failed, sometimes in like a good way. Like you learn from your mistakes.
And this isn't brain surgery. If you fail in this situation,
right.
It's okay.
No, that's my life's motto. Like, we are not doctors saving lives.
Yeah.
It's okay. Like,
it's okay.
Clarence, chill. You're Clarence.
Yeah.
So, but that was such a good experience. It was also my first time managing a whole team. I got to hire that team. Like, I loved so much about that job until it sucked. Yeah. But the most beautiful thing about that job was, in addition to doing this kind of like client-facing work, they had what's called publisher channels. So if you've ever seen like a Complex or a High Snobiety or a BuzzFeed, Refinery 29, these are all publishers. Mm-hmm. And they had almost like the TikTok version of publishers. Okay. So they had these channels across like fashion, interior design, kind of like youth culture on TikTok with like millions of followers. And I ended up pitching and like selling a show to that channel. Yeah. Because I really saw where serialized and short form content was going, almost in like this episodic format. And it was a fashion show. And I was really excited about it. I came up with it. I hosted it. I cast it. I got the production team for it. Like, did the run of show, like literally everything. And literally after filming episode 3, the whole company shut down.
Oh, no.
So that taught me really quickly that I love doing this, but that the second it was under that company's roof, it was not my IP.
Yeah.
And that was the same thing, that the whole existential crisis, no matter what I do, it's never Sara did it, it's X company. And that woke me up to say, I know I love doing this, but I gotta do it on my own, even if it costs money, obviously, and my own time and some substantial risk.
But if you have the how I started all of this is the same thing. It was just like, I don't want to do it under somebody else.
Yeah.
I want to have the creative control.
Yeah.
And yes, you're going to put yourself out there. You're going to have to like spend some money to like start it, but then you have the control of making sure it gets executed, that it's done the way that you want to do it.
100%.
And, you know, if it's successful, you get to say, it was all me. Also, if it's not successful, you have to say, that was my bad.
Yeah, but you can't fire yourself.
Yeah,
so like,
exactly.
that's fine.
Then I've said on the podcast before, you fail fast. You fail and move on.
Yes. I'm like, my new motto-ish that I'm working on is the next play mentality, which comes from sports, but it's always like, you don't dwell on what happened and what is. It's what's the next play? What's next? As the least athletic person, you probably know, like, doesn't fit, but that's okay.
That's okay. You still understand the analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so the reason I bring that up is because having that experience, even though it kind of failed quickly to your point, it made me say, okay, how can I pick up the pieces and do this for myself immediately?
Yeah.
And within a few months, I had set up my first conversation about doorman stories. And then that's what
doorman stories. I know it's kind of self-explanatory, but it's funny because you went from being in this fashion space to doing doorman stories. And it was kind of like a passion project.
Yeah.
That then kind of blew up.
Yeah.
So I want to first start, how did you come up with doorman stories? Like, how did the first episode start?
We literally hit the pavement with a microphone. Like, it was just like, and it was, I mean, if you ever listen to, what's the Guy Raz show? How I Built This.
How I Built This.
Yeah. So like, so many of my favorite How I Built This episodes, they were like FedEx salespeople or like Xerox.
Yeah. Like door to door,
like selling knives, selling Mary Kay, like, you know, that it's so different. It's like the 2024 version of that. But like, I literally was going door to door in high-end residential buildings in New York City, asking doormen if they would talk to me.
So you had the concept before.
I knew I wanted to do something serialized. I knew I wanted to do vertical video. And I knew I have tried and failed many things on my own. And I knew that my perfectionism was, I needed somebody to break the cycle. I needed to do it with someone.
Yeah.
So one of my friends, who we happen to have 40,000 mutual friends with, I kind of knew at the time, like very tangentially, but I knew that he was a videographer for social. So I was like, hey, can we grab a coffee? I want to like shoot some ideas by you. Just get your perspective. I wasn't planning on formally working with him yet at that time. And I think because I was kind of like scarred by the fashion show experience, I was like, we're not doing fashion. And then I'm like, so many other girls, when I was thinking about like female hosts, were doing dating, and I'm not single. So I was like, that's not right either.
She's
I'm not single.
There you go.
little like wing of the camera. I'm not single. So I was like, okay, that's not right either. And I had this like running list of ideas for him. And I was like, I knew that I wanted to do something like meaningful, and New York City specific, I think, that tapped into kind of what humankind in New York looked like. But in a way that other people weren't doing. So I have this laundry list of ideas. I came prepared.
Yeah. So you were there to like brainstorm almost with him.
Exactly.
Because I think that's an important point, that one, you don't have to come to the function with everything all the way laid out.
No.
And it's good to have someone else's perspective, and you can still have something that is a passion project that has a level of strategy to it.
100%.
You're looking for it to do something that's a passion project for you, that you feel is meaningful, that you feel is going to leave a mark and leave your legacy, right?
Yeah.
But also, you need it to be successful. You need it to work.
Totally.
So there has to be some sort of strategy, and there's brains behind the operation.
Totally.
Right?
And that's been the beauty of what my career has looked like post management consulting, is I have been doing strategic work behind the camera for social and my own work in front of the camera for social. And it's, I mean, to the detriment of my mental health, has made me chronically online. But it's also really helped me have like a well-rounded view of what's happening, what zeitgeisty conversations are happening on social, and just be like, have that, again, holistic view.
Yeah. So you got to Doorman Stories? Were there any other like a second runner up or something that was like feeling like it could have been that instead?
So not really, because he literally shot down every other idea I had.
Except
and
for that one.
Thank God. Thank God. Thank you, Joe. So the reason I'm so glad for that is because, to my earlier point about being so like perfectionistic, I needed a true unbiased critic to be like, hey, that's actually not the one. I have been in such a silo by myself. No one in my life was in this space to really be a true feedback loop for me, that when I had someone shooting me down, it was helpful. I want someone to tell me my idea is shitty, please. And so when we had that conversation, as soon as I said Doorman, he goes, oh yeah, that's the one.
Do it. Yeah.
And so again, another really helpful part of having a partner in this was that it helped me get out of my own way, because he was like, yeah, I'm free Tuesday, let's start.
How long was it between when you guys decided Doorman Stories and then when you filmed your first episode?
I mean, must have been a matter of a week. I mean, maybe it was a week. And I needed that momentum, you know?
I thought I started the podcast and got everything together so quickly. That's even faster. But I've been saying I used to be such a perfectionist, and we've talked about this. We're both entrepreneurs, and every other time I've done anything entrepreneurial, I have all my ducks in a row before I do it. But that takes a lot of time. And sometimes, like, even if you have all your ducks in a row, things change and things. I had a travel business, and then soon as things were going really well, a fucking global pandemic grounds everybody.
Right.
And then you got to like pivot and figure it out. So nothing is guaranteed. But if you just, I mean, I think anybody who's been to like, not even just business school, any business class, talk to anybody, mentor, whatever they're going to say, just start.
Just start.
Just start.
Dude,
and then
seriously.
figure out the rest later. If you're starting a product line, you don't have to have 10 different products. Just start with one.
Yes.
If you're going to just start. Maybe your first episode or your first podcast or your first product isn't the best, and then you figure it out.
And you know what? Let me just say, to your credit on the travel company, best launch party of all time to this day. That was an insane launch party. Like, that was wild. So, you know, but we live and we learn. And exactly, like, you don't have to have all your ducks in a row. And also, to the credit of Doorman Stories, even though I didn't have to have my ducks in a row, I did already start at kind of an elevated place, because I said, oh, I'm going to hire someone and invest in the same way. Like, you're not just picking up your iPhone recorder and going. Like,
I said this, like, I could have set up a camera, taught myself how to edit, taught myself X, Y, and Z, but I knew that would create too long of a period of time between when I formed the idea and when I wanted to like actually execute. So sometimes you have to invest in yourself. And I said, okay, I have this money set aside. I'm going to invest in getting people who actually know what they're doing so I can do something more high quality. And then it pays off. I mean, when I launched, the first thing people say is like how good the quality is of the production.
They notice it.
And they notice the work you're putting behind, even if it's something that you think people aren't going to see.
Yeah. I also think another like lesson to the listeners is, when you bet on yourself, even to a small degree, bet on yourself for $200, like whatever it is. Not only are you putting some faith in yourself, two, that investment is delegating something to somebody else. So you didn't know how to edit, for example. I mean, neither do I. But because you've now outsourced that, you can focus on what you do better, which is hosting or asking questions or just being invested in your guest. If in the back of your head, you're thinking, oh, that'll be like a good clip, I need to remember like 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Like, you're not involved in the conversation and it'll show. So that bet on yourself and that initial investment kind of already, I started off at a better place than some of my past ventures.
I think about it too as like something where maybe you're spending money elsewhere, right? But you're freeing up your time. And I know I can pay someone else X amount to edit this, and it might take them, and I'm making these numbers up because I've never edited anything in my own podcast. Let's say it takes them 3 hours. It would take me 7 hours.
Right.
So I'd rather pay someone else to do it than I have 7 hours of free time to do the marketing stuff, to do outreach, to do the other things that I can do well quickly. And it helps. It's literally an investment in yourself, because you're freeing up your own time to maximize it in the ways that you are more efficient.
Yeah, could not agree more. And both of us have seen, there's like proof in that. We've both experienced that. First day for Doorman, we were literally hitting the pavement of these New York City streets, walking in, getting deaded. And I think we probably got deaded like a good 7 times. And I remember thinking in the back of my head, like, oh man, like this guy's never going to do this with me again. Like it was such a fail. But I also was saying to myself in a more like affirmative way, like, at least I can say I tried. Like I didn't even feel bad. I was like, you know what? This is good. Now
What's when you're interviewing doormen, like I mean, I don't live in a doorman millie now, but when I did for my first like few years in New York, when I was like wild and crazy, I'd be like, these doormen see everything. And I hope they never tell anyone.
But maybe they will.
So maybe, I mean, they're not going to say me by name. We need to do one with my old doormen.
I would love to.
I still, when I go uptown, I still like stop by and say hi to them.
Okay, we're doing that. That's like part 3 of our ventures together.
Yeah.
But yes, exactly. So I was like, no matter what, I was getting shut down, but I was like, no matter what, the certainty of saying I tried is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, has like, again, been another like nugget that I've taken with me over the years that like has really served me well.
Think of it as it's an investment in yourself, but it's also an investment in like your education. Yeah. I think about my first business, the travel business that technically failed because of COVID, right? Yeah. But I learned more. I mean, I did go to business school. I learned more starting my own business and it failing than I did in business school. I
1000% agree.
I mean, I got a scholarship to business school, but if I had paid full price for business school, my company and the money I lost was way less expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is so true.
Yeah.
And look, everybody's journey is different. You decide what works for you. But again, learning by doing will always, I mean, I can't imagine that sitting in a classroom would be more valuable than the applied learning. Yeah. I really can't imagine.
I mean, this is like a total side note, but as someone who did go to business school, I would never really suggest someone go to business school right after graduating from college.
No, you need the experience.
A lot of people do that, but you don't have any real world context, right? So maybe you're looking at P&Ls and you're, and you can see it on paper, but unless you've ever been in a business, you don't have the context for what that really means or how that, functions in a work dynamic. I mean, I got a degree in management. If I had never been in a true work setting where other people were managing me and I was seeing the social politics of all that, how would I understand what was happening in school?
1000%.
Right? It's not the same.
I'm sure there are principles you carry from business school into what you're doing now, but you learn so much more by doing. Period. Exactly. Full stop. That is truly my belief.
100%.
So then we had one guy hit. One guy was like, yes. And then, so that first day, 2 guys said yes. And I still remember both of their stories. Yeah. And one guy, he told a really good story about a resident's engagement ring fell down the trash chute and he had to go in legit dumpster diving. Yeah. And what a lot of people don't know is that most buildings in New York City actually have incinerators. So this is no light work. Like this is, this is legit serious business. So that was a really good story. And then the second story, which I still love, was this gentleman, Manny, who was just telling like a random night shift story about random person walks by his building at, I mean, maybe 3 a.m, fully dumps their tits and like keeps walking. And I'm like, getting that on camera, I'm thinking in the back of my head, gold. Yes, Manny, thank you. So that was really, it was just those 2 moments of a very challenging experience were really...
That was like your green light to be like, okay, we're on to something.
Yes. And I've always believed, and I still believe this in myself, that I'm a slow burn. I really do. And some of my best friends feel that way about themselves too, which is a motivating like place to be, that we see this long runway for ourselves, but are on the right path. And Doorman was a bit of a slow burn. I would say there were a few months that we didn't go instantly viral, even though we had good stories. But what I did notice about it that I did not have from past ventures of mine is that even on the videos that got 1,000 views, like maybe even sub 1,000, or when we couldn't even break 5,000 followers, those smaller days, I noticed instantly there was a community forming, very small. So just putting my marketing and social hat on, there's a huge difference between somebody that has 300,000 followers and 2 comments on their videos, and somebody with 1,000 followers but 20 comments on their videos. And I noticed that really quickly, that even when we had this really small following, there was
very engaged.
Immediately there were comments like, this is such an interesting take on New York, or wow, I know that this channel is going to blow up. There was early faith and early belief, early community that excited me and continued to make me...
Then you're just like, okay, if I stick around this long enough, I'm going to continue to find the right people, or they're going to find me.
Yes. And it was also around this time that I just kind of been taking stock of all of the ventures I tried. And I mean all, like, we're going back elementary school.
Yeah.
Like, I was like a lemonade stand. Like, yeah.
On the lemonade stand.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was like taking stock of everything. And I just kind of, maybe this was a little self-deprecating of me, but I kind of labeled myself as a start and stopper, like that I never could see things through.
I thought that about myself.
At the time I was doing life coaching, the nickname I gave myself was Oprah Wimpy. It's just like, I'm so exposing myself right now.
I love it.
But because I had these big aspirations and public facing aspirations transparently.
And it's hard to fail publicly.
Right. But then there was the wimpy part where I would start and then be like, oh no, I'm nervous, and like crawl into myself. So that was, I was taking stock of all that and then seeing the kind of like bubbles of hope and opportunity with Doorman, so that the past that I wanted to rectify plus these little like, you know, exciting moments kept me going.
Yeah.
I mean,
I want to interject only to like talk about this point for a second of like the Oprah Winfrey.
Oh God, okay.
But I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to. I know I'm relating to it right now because I know how my friends speak about me, how you've spoken about me, like, oh, you've done all these awesome things and you have this career. I don't see my own career that way.
Yeah.
It's taken me a lot of time to really try to appreciate all the things that I've done.
Yeah.
Because usually we're like in it and then we talk about fail fast, move on, you go, right? But I think a lot of people can relate to the idea of feeling like they've failed at something. And what really we're doing is we're learning a lesson. We're piling all these things together so that you can do something like Doorman Story, so that I can do something like this. And who knows, maybe these things will fail for us and then we'll do something else.
Yeah,
right?
you pick yourself up. Yeah.
But I think a lot of people can relate to that because I think that the generation before us, like our parents' generation, right, is very much, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like my parents, it was you go to school and you do things the right way and then you get a job at a place and then you climb the ladder and you stick around.
It's a linear thing.
Yeah, it's very linear, but that's not how our generation really moves about the workforce. Yeah. And it's kind of contradictory to everything we grew up doing. So we're looking at ourselves like, oh, we're failing, or we, you know, I'm like, oh, I can't decide what I want to do with these multi-hyphenates because I'm just ADD and I can't figure it out. Yeah. But really, we're just doing things in a different way. We're going around and learning and picking up different tools and whatnot that we can come together. Also, we're still young. I know we are joking about our age, but like,
no, we are.
You think about Instagram and social media makes everybody feel like there's this instant gratification and that, like, you know, you start a business and then the next year you're making millions of dollars. Yeah. That's not how it is. And you look at our parent generation, and my parents do very well for themselves. They didn't really start to see the real, you know, fruits of their labor until, I want to say, I think it took my parents like 20 something years to pay off their student loan debts.
My dad too. Same
and
thing.
You look at, like, my parents have a house in the Hamptons and they're doing all this fun stuff, and someone looks at them and they'd be like, oh, they just had it all. It's like, it still took them 30. It took my dad 20 and I think my mom 25 years to pay off their student loan debts. I mean, but look at them now.
Right. And they're enjoying it as they should, you know, the hard-earned kind of reward of that. But so I actually think generationally, you are spot on. Yeah. The benefit that I had is, one, I think just as a product of our generation, I was on the same page that every 2 to 3 years, I'm like, oh, we got to shake it up. But actually, my dad was an anomaly of his generation and has had about 50,000 different jobs. There we go. And I think seeing that almost gave me the permission to experiment too, because I saw it firsthand how he was different from his generation. Yeah. And so I think it's kind of ingrained in me. And he was able
to raise a family.
Oh my God. Living in New York and raise a family and changing careers. I mean, I will say, by the time I was starting, actually, no, I'm thinking about it now. He really didn't find his thing until I was in like middle school. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah, middle school. So it takes a long time. And now he's retired. But, you know, it took him a long time. And now he's enjoying retirement, of course. Like, who wouldn't?
Which is like, I think it is also important to just enjoy the ride. Yes. Because it might be a long ride, and that's okay.
Not a giving journey, not the destination. Like, could we be more cliche? Yeah.
Right. Let's just like, we're also going to start a greeting card line.
Guys, we're multi-hyphenates. There you go. Richie and Sara, greeting card line. Oh my God. I'm crying. So Yes, I think that was a really important thing to reflect
Yeah.
on. I do think it's so important for people to give themselves the permission to change and to pivot. I've always said I'm like a pivot queen because I just can't
Yeah.
stick to one thing, and that's me rebranding my lack of focus sometimes into, you know, a better spin, but it is important.
But I do think there's a difference between giving up and cutting your losses.
Yeah, yes. And sunk cost fallacy is so real.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to realize that, but it is so real. I think you're 100% right.
Yeah, because like I said, I had a travel business, and it was really had just started. I remember we had just gotten 2 like really big checks.
Yeah.
Our first like big brand deals, and giving back those checks was really hard.
It's like knife in the
like,
heart.
oh, you finally just like broke through, but you're like, it's COVID, like insurance, like trip insurance was
Yeah.
going up. It was like, this is not going to be sustainable. And could I wait it out and wait a couple years and then try to restart? Yeah, but what am I supposed to do? Twiddle my thumbs for 2 years? No, I went back to school and decided to do something new. And people were like asking me, I did keep the business open for a little bit, just like kept my LLC, and people would ask, oh, you're going to bring it back? I'm like, but I've already decided to do something else. And now my time is invested here. If things had gone differently, maybe I would have stayed in it.
But you cut your
Who
losses
knows?
when
But
you needed to.
Exactly. But I don't look at it. There was a time where I looked at it as a failure, and now I'm just like, sometimes circumstances just happen.
Yeah.
And like the universe is trying to push you in a different direction.
Yeah.
And you just kind of have to go with it. But I think that nugget of just like, there is a difference between failing and cutting your losses.
1,000%. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think that's an important thing for people to. I honestly think you don't see that until you have experienced both failure and cutting your losses.
Yeah.
But when
it feels different.
yes, there is a different feeling. And having been on the other side of an opportunity of an experience where I thought that it was failure, but it actually was cutting my losses, I see there is an energetic difference about them. You're so right. And with Doorman, our first like big hit and our first few brand deals.
Was like when you realized, okay, this is going somewhere bigger.
There are a few things. I mean, definitely just like, I think at face value growth, like going viral, breaking 10K, 20K, which again took a minute, but those were like some significant moments. I think pretty early on, I'm bitter about this. We got attention from the Kelly Clarkson show, and they ended up running an episode about doormen with doormen that I sent them and then didn't feature us on the show.
Oh, come on, Kelly. I used to love Kelly Clarkson.
It was bad. I mean, I'm sure it's not Kelly, but her people.
Put in that clip where it's like, Kelly Clarkson.
No, Kelly Clarkson. That's an edit. Done. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so again, ended kind of in like a sourpuss way, but the getting noticed at that level, another kind of moment for me where I was like, okay, this is legit, is the handle New Yorkers. They're really big on social, obviously, because they're New Yorkers. And they have reposted our content from very early days. And that honestly was a huge reason that we got to 10K, 20K, 100K.
I mean, I tell people all the time who are like trying to get into influencing and whatnot, it kind of just happened for me, at least to getting to like 20, 30K.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it happens from like cross-pollination. People reposting things, you start working with a brand. And like at the very beginning when I would just get things for free, and I'd invite them as a collaborator, or like they would repost, and that's how I would get followers.
The community.
It's from the community, because if someone else likes what they're posting, they're going to like what you're posting, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
It's like, it's kind of common sense, but it takes time.
Yes.
It's not an overnight thing.
No. And again, that's why I've always said I'm a slow burn, because it was not overnight. I didn't have my big viral moment, you know, in 2019. It takes time to find your thing. So those were some early successes or indicators of success. Then I think we reached a certain point where we didn't monetize, but we did a gifted deal really early on, which also made me feel like I had some credibility.
Yeah.
And it was with a underwear company, but the concept was giving out flowers. So we gave out flowers to doormen, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
But so those were some early indicators. Then we started having some like truly viral videos, and a true viral video is 1 million plus. So we started having a few truly viral videos over the summer of when we first started. Then we started monetizing. And it kind of has just grown.
How long did it take from like your first video to when you started being able to monetize? Because just for someone else who's like watching this, knowing, okay, I'm going to probably have to keep my day job and kind of straddle the two.
Yeah.
Because it's not a month, it's not 2 months. It could be a year. It could be longer.
I think there are a lot of factors. I think with Doorman, it takes longer because it's so niche and people don't, like brand managers or influencer managers or whatever you want to call it, who are handling these deals, don't see the obvious fit, especially in our earlier days.
Yeah. It's a little more strategic. It's if you're posting fashion content and a fashion brand
then
reaches out to you,
if you have
easy.
30K followers doing fashion, you can monetize really quickly.
Yeah.
Because it's just obvious.
Yeah.
Fit check, here's new coat. Done. The pipeline is right there.
Yeah.
Doorman is a little more bespoke. It's a little more hand holding, a little more education on the brand side. I will say one of our best partners that was an obvious fit was Built, the credit card, because of course, renters, Doorman, it was just such a layup. But there are only so many that are like that. So there was a little bit of hand holding.
I would imagine you have to do a little bit more pitching.
Yes, it was a lot of outbound. It still is. I like pitching, so it is outbound. Or you have managers that pitch for you, which is also great. But that was really, I think why we had a longer runway is because it's so niche that sometimes you don't see the obvious fit. Yeah. But like when you flip it on its head, literally any brand could work because our best. I think anytime you want to think about starting a platform that you can monetize, you come up with like what I'm calling on the fly, a monetization formula. What is the rinse and repeat style of brand integration in an organic way? And for us, just using Doorman as an example, surprise and delight. You just run around giving out shit to doormen. It's gonna be a hit because they genuinely appreciate it. They are such good salt of the earth people who appreciate whether it's a check or a burrito. Like they will take it and genuinely be grateful for it.
Well, you think about it, like, I mean, in New York, we have so many doormen because we have all these big buildings, right? Yeah. And the doormen are usually the guys who they're just opening the door. People aren't paying attention to them. And that's part of why I love doorman stories.
That's part of why I love it too.
Yeah, because they're people who tend to be overlooked on the day-to-day that are filled with knowledge, delight, surprise, all of these different things and have all of these stories.
Absolutely. And I also think that's a huge reason why Doorman Stories is successful as well, or at least for me, why I'm grateful for it is because, of course, I am Doorman Stories.
Yeah.
I sometimes will get comments, even though it's the Doorman Stories account, I very often get comments being like, thanks, Sara. This is your best guy, Sara. I mean, I am very much associated with it. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's about them. Yeah. And that really helps me because I think inherently our space is very narcissistic and self-centered. Yeah. And you're doing something here that you're the facilitator of it. Yeah. But it exists because of the guests.
Because we were talking before, like about purpose and wanting things to be not centered just on yourself and leaving a legacy and whatnot. Yeah. And I love that. Also, because I was describing doormen as being overlooked, but I feel like they're overlooked in a sense that, if you're going to someone else's building, you just kind of like pass by. But as a New Yorker, when you live in that building, you're seeing your doormen every single day. Yeah. And they're seeing everything that you're doing. And it is a weird, like half parasocial and half very intimate of a relationship that like you have with a doorman.
It is so unique. Yeah. It is part of why it is such a successful, like close-knit community because if you're a New Yorker, it's an if you know thing. Yeah. And if you're not a New Yorker, you're curious. Like, what? Exactly. You're intrigued. You're like, I don't understand this. How does this function? Mm-hmm. The other beautiful thing about Doorman, when I think about it long-term and what growth could mean in different ways is technically there are hotel doormen anywhere in the world, or there's a bouncer at every bar and club you go to. There are other definitions of it, which I like that kind of expansiveness of it.
I know we're getting to a point we're going to start to wrap up, but that was going to be my next question is where do you see this going long-term? You talk about career, longevity. It obviously is not going to end here. Where do you see Doorman Stories expanding? And then also like if there's any other part of your career that you'd like to expand. Yeah.
So I decided kind of at the tail end of wrapping up my existential crisis that because I had undiagnosed ADD and could not choose a niche, that it was more, instead of a niche, how can I choose a mission statement for myself so that no matter what I do, even if it feels very, northwest, east, south, and all over the map, there is some grounding linear connection to them. And so I said, my mission statement or my purpose is to tell stories that make people feel happy and think differently. And I was just period, done, love.
I love that. Everybody should have a personal mission statement.
Yes.
A personal, I feel like, I don't know if I said this in the last podcast I recorded, but I had shouted out Tinks because she was giving dating advice or like basically breakup advice. Yeah. And she had said, instead of focusing on like all these things that are wrong with you, or what could I do to catch somebody or whatever. She was just saying, just focus on being more interesting. So I feel like in 2025, that's been my mission statement, is just be more interesting, whatever that means. Like, so if that's saying yes to doing something I normally wouldn't do, if it's reading a book, or if it's trying a new hobby, if it's making sure I'm working really hard, whatever it is, do the things that are going to make you feel more interesting.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Yeah. That's great. And I agree. There it should be, whether it's on an annual basis or permanent, having brand yourself, give yourself a mission statement, especially if you feel like you can't niche yourself down. That's a little bit more of a gentle way to give yourself.
To kind of rein yourself in.
Yeah, exactly. So I bring that up only to say whatever venture I pursue, whether it's through Doorman Stories or something else, even though it will be Doorman Stories, that's the kind of through line for me and how I filter my decisions through. With Doorman, I think I always talk about three things with what growth looks like. I think it's one, it's the obvious, which is just continuing to grow the platform, both in terms of platform size, like who follows us and knows about us, but also how we can sustain it monetarily, because every brand deal we do, part of it goes to the Doorman, not necessarily financially, because sometimes we're not compensated financially, but like it's product based. So they get the products that we give out, or we give them a portion of the money that we make, things like that. And also I do spend money on it. I invest in it. So I want to be able to recoup that loss. Two is I'm very gung-ho on a literary angle for this. I need it to be a coffee table book.
I mean, you've seen, I have stacks of coffee table books. I'll be your first customer.
Yay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Even though I'm sending you one. But
you can send me one, then I'll buy another.
Perfect. But I think I really see that as like the coffee table book. I want to walk into a McNally Jackson and just see it on display.
I see that for you.
Yeah, thank you. So that's lane number two. And then I think lane number three is potentially, I kind of like asterisk this one because you just never know, but I do think that there is a sort of mockumentary or scripted kind of angle of this, and would love to see what that looks like. I get messages about that all the time. But, and even going back to number one, which is about growing the platform, always doubling down and growing in New York. That's what this is. But there are ways places. Like Chicago has Doorman, LA has Doorman, Toronto, there's a bunch of different places. I get DMs all the time from these guys in London, ye old door boys, like DM me. So I'm like, great, like Park Lane, Sheridan, let's go.
I'm also just thinking about like other, I guess like jobs, like Uber drivers, taxi drivers, things that people that are in situations where they're hearing a lot of things, they're experiencing a lot of things, but they get to be a fly on the wall in a lot of situations because they're overlooked.
They are the true eyes and ears of the city. They are. And that is especially because I'm from New York, to be able to pay it forward in this way it is honestly emotional. Like I feel so moved by this experience. For the most part,
a lot of these doormen don't get their praise or
their flowers
until the holidays when they're getting a tip, but they have a whole year.
Exactly. And what I think another kind of big learning of Doorman, and when I think about, even taking the subject matter out of it, like what is so special about it? Obviously they are, but I think the ability, so inherently being a doorman, to be a good doorman requires a level of discretion. So how do you, that's, again, inherently conflictual with a social media channel telling their stories. And I think the reason it's so successful is because we have built a ton of trust with them to know that we're going to tell that story in a respectful way and build that community. And now, did I bore you, Puck? I love this boy.
His eyes are open.
Oh, you're listening intently. But that is why I think it's successful too, is because there's a lot of trust there. It's a real community, and it's real New York.
Well, I love the goals you have for the future. And I feel like they're not only reasonable and attainable, but I think anybody can apply that kind of algorithm to them looking into like their future for whatever it is, not just if you want to be a content creator of some sort, but that really kind of applies to any sort of life endeavor. So I love that. We're giving the girls and guys a little guide. That's the whole purpose of this.
It's a guide. You can apply, you really can. I mean, whether you want to, if I wanted to go back to management consulting tomorrow, I would still apply these principles, truly.
I love that. So I know we're going to wrap it up, but I like to end my guest interview episodes with just giving you an opportunity to shout out somebody else or another business that you want to give your flowers to, since we're
giving my flowers to Puck. Oh, my little downward dog. Yes. So I have a bouquet, so we're giving away many flowers.
Yeah.
So definitely Joe, who I do Doorman Stories with. So he's kind of my co-producer, videographer, editor, partner, very much so. Wouldn't exist without him. Definitely want to give my flowers to, you know, the first doorman who said yes to us. And also our most recent interview was with this gentleman, Franco, who, oh my God, I almost cried during our interview simply because his aura was just pure goodness. And we've gotten so many comments saying, this is the best interview you've done. There is no truer New Yorker than this man. Yeah. He invited us to Sunday sauce with his parents. That's a New York staple. Yes.
Like that kind of invite.
Coveted.
Yeah. That doesn't go to just anybody.
No.
Sunday
Sorry,
sauce?
Zero Bond. I'm going to eat Sunday sauce. Like, that's a bar. So that's, you know, that was a really, you know, really meaningful. He gets a flower. Yeah. Dig was one of our first partners and they really believed in us. So, I mean, that's a flower. This is kind of out of left field, but Amelia de Moldenberg gets a flower. She has no idea who I am, but it's fine.
Go for it.
The reason I say that is because she was not able to consider Chicken Shop Date an entity, a success, whatever you want to call it, for a decade. She put in a decade's worth of work.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel, like this slow burn. You're really, you know, the trial and error of it all, the self-funding of it all. She had an opportunity to sell her business. She didn't. She kept it under her own name. And now, like, girl, go marry Andrew Garfield. Like, do it. You know what I mean? Like, good for you. And I love her. I love her work. She's such a blueprint for me. Yeah. So she gets a flower.
Well, thank you, Sara. If you want to follow Sara or Doorman Stories, it's at Sara Leeds, right?
Sara and Leeds on Instagram and TikTok, which is more my life. Yeah. And then Doorman Stories on Instagram and TikTok as well.
Check it out. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Puck is obviously ready for us to wrap this up.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay. See you again soon.
Yep.